We're just gonna wait. Okay, welcome to the JDC West 2022 International Business Case Presentation. Thank you to our judges, Bridget Lazarco, Ted Morehouse, Amanda Bjornson, Brian Gilchrist, and Roderick McIntosh. Competitors, you will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask the presenters questions. Competitors, you will see Zoom chat notifications at various intervals to indicate the remaining time. Any speaker who continues to speak after the maximum time limit will be stopped. No questions or comments will be permitted from the audience. All judges are asked to have their microphones muted during the presentation. The audience is banned from any material or naming convention that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience leave the Zoom call immediately following the presentation. Judges, please stay on this call until I advise you to move to the next call. Competitors, you may begin your presentation.
Perfect, thank you so much. All right. The best way to predict the future is to design it. Panel, today your company, Architectronics, is at a border crossing, faced with important decisions to make. We at Novus Consulting are so excited to help you design and shape an eco-efficient future. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a tremendous honor to present to you today. My name is Charles, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Davis and Karin. Our overarching question that we want to be answering for you today is how it is your company, Architectronics, can scale into new markets with an impact-driven approach. We've broken this hefty question down into 3 key parts for you: which markets to prioritize and scale your offerings, how to adapt to the workflow and culture of that market, and how to develop winning capabilities in your new market. We're very excited to present to you our strategy, Eco-Efficiency, accelerating energy efficiency in Denmark by driving forward an eco-centric offering. Through 3 key tactical recommendations, we're going to allow you to achieve a game-winning strategy for top-line growth and ultimately position your company for future market expansion by 2023. First, let's take a dive into your company's current state and key considerations that we need to make in order to win on a global stage. Recognize that your company right now boasts a very strong value offering in Canada. You've got a very multicultural team representing more than 12 different ethnicities that allows you to adapt to local expressions very well. You've also have very innovative and fresh designs, expertise in designing alive outdoor green spaces, winning several awards in the past. These are key strengths that must be leveraged to capture opportunities moving forward. Now, you've been playing in Canada for the past 10 years, and it's time for you to look towards the international stage. There's 2 key stakeholders that we really want to keep in mind here. First of all is your board of directors. They've outlined a short-term and a long-term goal. You need to complete your first international project by the end of 2022, and following that, 1 international project per year after. And so today we want to focus on a solution that is scalable and allows you to tap into new markets going forward. Second of all, we also want to keep in mind your impact-driven company values that surround inclusivity, green space, local expression, and community impact. You have a 1-year timeline now to enter a new market successfully with an impact-driven strategy. And so the key question we want to tackle for you today is how it is your company can leverage these competencies to transcend borders with an impact-driven approach. First of all, let's take a look at the current Philippine expansion that you're considering. This expansion fails to meet both of your short-term and long-term goals. While it was seemingly attractive at first, it is plagued by short and long-term challenges. From a short-term perspective, your key personnel, including Karina and Marissa, are both unable to travel to the Philippines because of personal reasons, such as being uncomfortable to travel, as well as being unvaccinated. However, Filipino culture means that in-person visits are necessary to win the bid. That's because Filipino relationships are built on emotional closeness and intimacy. And so this arises an ethical issue for your company. Whether or not you should be unethical towards your employees and force them to travel to the Philippines or risk losing your bid. As a company that prides itself on inclusivity and focus on our people, we proudly recommend that you risk losing this bid so that you can protect your employees' interests. But second of all, from a long-term perspective, this Filipino expansion is unattractive as well. First of all, the cultural distance. Although your team is diverse, you have no background in Southeast Asia, and you're going to have to learn their culture and workforce by scratch. Second of all, the ease of doing business in Philippines is very low. To register a business, it takes 33 days, and to get a construction permit, it can take up to 120 days. Keep in mind, you only have 1 year to get into this new market. Finally, it's actually got a very small and shrinking green space market. Manila has 0.03% green space, and it's shrinking due to an increased focus on economic development. This Filipinos growth opportunity does not meet your long-term goals. So what we take away from this analysis is that pursuing the Filipino expansion is both going to be unethical towards your employees and also doesn't align with your long-term objectives. So next, in looking at what market we want to play in, let's identify what key success factors we need to be evaluating these countries on. We've identified 5 must-win battles for you: achieving long-term top-line growth, meeting your short-term goal of 1 project by 2022, capturing a sizable market share, and ensuring a seamless workflow with your clients, and finally, minimizing COVID-driven challenges. We've crunched these must-win battles into 5 key metrics that we're going to be thoroughly assessing as we evaluate what country is going to be best for your company. Next, we took the top 2 must-have criteria and we did a preliminary screening of the market alternatives available to you. What we want to focus on here is the scatter plot on the left. We want to focus on companies with a low time to market, represented by days to acquire a permit, and countries that have a high percentage of green space. So we want to be focusing on that bottom right quadrant. Based on this analysis, we've identified 5 key markets that we want you to focus on. The 3 identified in our analysis to the left, as well as Spain and Australia, which are management selected and was presented to us in the case. And so we want to incorporate that into our analysis as well. So based on our 5 key criteria and these 5 countries that we've chosen, we did a comprehensive analysis on these countries to see which country would be most attractive for you to enter. We'd be very happy to dive deeper into this alt matrix during Q&A, but we wanted to provide you with the highlights right now. First of all, in Australia, they have falling construction activity, which has created intense competition to obtain a limited number of projects. In Spain, it takes 147 days to get a construction permit. This may not be feasible within a year for you at all and does not meet that short-term goal. Third of all, in Singapore, it's a very small market size and one of the most competitive architecture markets globally. The United States, for a similar reason, it's the 2nd most competitive architecture market in the world, and it's very saturated. We'd like to point you to Denmark, though. Denmark is an untapped architectural market with low barriers of entry for you. Entering Denmark aligns with your short-term objectives. First of all, they are very receptive to remote work, having a similar working culture to Canada. More and more people in Denmark prefer online work, actually, and giving you flexible options to react to COVID. Second of all, they have a very high ease of doing business. It only takes 4 days to register a business and 64 days to get a permit, which is half of that in the Philippines. The Denmark government is also actively encouraging foreign direct investment, offering green subsidies. Our analysis tells us that it is possible to enter Denmark within just 2 months, compared to a fruitless 7-month process that you've already spent in the Philippines right now. At the same time, Denmark provides you a ripe growth runway for long-term growth. First of all, they have very favorable policy to propel industry growth. Copenhagen is the #1 greenest city in the world and actively pursues green space projects. EU's Green New Deal is pushing developers also to go green, and there's also tax incentives to help build green spaces. Second of all, on top of this, they also have one of the lowest saturated markets. They actually have an undersupply of domestic architecture firms to fill those bids, and they have one of the highest market values per architect at 39,000 euros. Denmark is a high-growth, untapped market for green space and energy-efficient architecture. And so based on our analysis here, we want to ask the question how your company can successfully enter and win in the Danish market through an impact-driven strategy. We're very excited to present to you our overarching strategy today, eco-efficiency. I'd like to hand it off to Davis now to walk you through what that means.
Thank you so much, Charles. So looking at our eco-efficient strategy, we broke it down into 3 parts. Number 1 is to expand the scene by expanding architectronics into Denmark and bid for new projects. Secondly, we want to change the routine. We want to adapt the current workflow to align with Denmark's culture. And finally, our game changer, we want to opt for green. We want you to launch new eco-texture service line to heighten your core offerings. Let's take a look at what expanding the scene looks like. When we look at how to expand tectonics into Denmark and bid for these new projects. Currently on the left, we've established that the supply of Danish architecture services are low, given you can see by the high market value per architect. What this means is that Danish developers and governments are looking towards international firms to fill this gap in the market. And we believe you are well positioned to capture this growing demand because 1, you have a European heavy team that is ready to benefit from easy adapting to culture as well as incorporating local expression in designs. Second of all, we believe you would be able to acquire support from the Export Development of Canada, the EDC. And doing this will provide you various downside protection mechanisms, such as account receivable insurance or political risk insurance. One case study we want to point you to is PyroWave. In 2018, EDC helped PyroWave, which is a clean tech company, enter the European market through their funding and expertise. And as a result, PyroWave successfully generated $1 million revenue post-expansion, and was very successful. And we believe this sets a ground of precedence for you to go as well. Let's take a look at how we actually want to do this though. In terms of our plan, we looked over 40 possible bids for you that are currently going on right now that meets your deadline. And on the right, we have a summary table of the ones we believe fit to you based on the criteria of your past experience in it, the size of the project, as well as the deadline that you're looking for. Zooming in a little more on these, we pinpointed one particular opportunity that is a very attractive opportunity for you, which is an autism center that is supposed to be built in Denmark. You currently have previous expertise in community buildings. It aligns with your value of community impact, and this meets your timeline and will generate you $11.5 million of revenue. However, we believe this is the best first project for you to go into because you have a bidding advantage. Green space is known to be beneficial to mental and physical health. Denmark's University of Art has found that childhood exposure to green spaces reduce the risk of developing psychiatric disorders. Knowing this, we believe the developers of the Autism Center will be looking for a partner like you with green space expertise to be able to build this out. Actually executing on this, we believe you should assemble a suitable project team to be in person to source and bid in Denmark. We looked at criteria of cultural background, architectural expertise, as well as willingness to travel, and we think that you, Andres, the head of development, should be able to run the team with 2 architects such as Christina and Michael, both with European backgrounds. Ultimately, to monitor this, we want to look at revenue generated, the number of supported members of the autistic community, and which overall leads to milestones and a final impact of $11.5 million of revenue and positively impacting the autism community.
After we expand into Denmark and bid for new projects, the second recommendation that we have for you is to change the routine. And this is really focused on adapting the current workflow that you have that's been so successful in Canada to align with Denmark's culture. Now, first, let's take a look at your current design process. Now, your current design process currently consists of pre-design, where you understand the basic requirements, talk to the clients a lot, and get to know them and do the ideation and brainstorming phase. And then you move on to the basic schematic and the developing of designs. Then you really bring it to life in the downstream process, where you're able to translate your developed designs into construction documents and then move those towards actual construction, and you monitor construction to ensure success. Now, this has been really successful in Canada, but let's see how this can be adapted to the Danish culture. There are 3 key adaptation points which we'll have to implement in order to be able to transform your current process into the Danish market. The first is the people. Now, the pre-design stage was completely focused on interacting with the client, doing that back and forth, getting to know them, but also getting to understand their values. And here, we really want to be able to focus on the key differences between Danish and Canadian culture, which come through communicating, leading, and decision-making. The second part of the upstream process is the basic schematic and the developing of the design. And here, what we can recognize is that Danish construction and architecture firms use slightly different technologies to Canadian architecture and construction firms. So there needs to be a translation of that process to be able to meet the demands and the needs of the Danish clients. And thirdly, for contractor relations, you only have experience with Canadian contractors and not Danish contractors. And so this is something that you will have to keep in mind and to learn upon as you enter the Danish market. Now let's take a look at an example of how this would actually play out with a prospective client of yours. Meet Josephine. Josephine is a building operations lead at a real estate company. She has an egalitarian leadership style. She values equality and accessibility and makes decisions that try to achieve consensus. Here, how this translates into your workflow is that Josephine is a former engineer who is familiar with Danish technologies such as Revit technology. She relies on Danish social cues when speaking to potential partners and vendors and building that initial trust. And so what you want to be able to do as you enter this market in order to meet the demands of a potential client like Josephine is to adapt to that technology as well, and also learn more about the culture in order to be able to build a better relationship. And when it comes down to the downstream process, you want to be able to learn how the contracts work in Denmark to be able to adequately deal with the different contractors and pursue fruitful partnerships. Now let's look at how this will actually be implemented. For the pre-design phase, the 2 people that are mostly involved are the project leaders, and what will need to be changed is increased transparency and a spread of information when making decisions. Now, the key players when it comes to the next process, which is basic schematic and developing of designs, is actually the architects. And these are where they will actually build the designs. Now, what we really want to focus on here is for your architects to learn Revit technology instead of AutoCAD, which is currently the most popular software in Canada, to be able to adapt to the needs of the Danish market and to also understand the local architectural designs to inform your ideation and research. Now, ultimately, in terms of the downstream process, both of these two parties will be involved and they'll collaborate to make decisions. But what's really key here is that we want to be able to oversee the contractors in an egalitarian leadership style to be able to adapt to the market needs in Denmark. Now, to be able to execute this, there are two key steps. The first are a series of trainings, unconscious bias training, as well as cultural immersion course, which is available on the Danish government website for free. And here you'll be able to learn more about the Danish market, as well as learn how to communicate with them. And as soon as that initial contact, that connection is built, we want to identify and establish champions of change from both sides to ensure smooth sailing in case of anything rough that comes up. And to move on to the monitor side, what you really want to monitor are the key KPIs of employee proficiency with Revit technology, employee satisfaction, and identifying new contractors. Ultimately, your milestones will be to build your first successful design, get that 85% employee satisfaction at least, and source 5 potential new contractors, ultimately allowing you to successfully adapt your workflow and complete bid projects. Now, our first recommendation for you was to expand the scene, to expand to Denmark. The second was to adapt and change your routine to Denmark. The third recommendation here is the game changer. It is to launch a new ecotecture service line to heighten your core offering so that you can succeed and win in Denmark and beyond. Now let's look at the market in demand currently. Denmark has high demand for energy efficient buildings, and in the last 12 years, we can see that there's been a 31% increase in renewable energy usage in buildings. And we can also see that the government is pushing for new energy efficient buildings and green architecture in Denmark through different taxes and also tax credit. Now, this is a great opportunity for you, but unfortunately, you don't have the capabilities to fulfill this demand yet. Now, what capabilities you currently have are that you have beautiful green space architecture. You have high quality, innovative designs that are specific to local culture. Unfortunately, what capabilities you lack are the energy efficiency engineering knowledge of actually building out your designs and the local energy efficiency network in Denmark. And so ultimately what we can gather from this is that to tap into Denmark's large demand for energy efficient buildings, you must partner with a company that has the engineering capabilities required initially. An example of this that we've modeled for you is that we have on the left side a brochure of the new ecotecture service line. And on the right, we have an example of a project that you could take on that involves both green space and also the green architecture. Now, a good case study example of this that we can refer you to is that the UN city has been designed to use at least 55% less energy than similar sized buildings. So it's a UN city building in Copenhagen, and it was built by a Danish firm. It's called 3XN, who currently possess both architectural and energy efficient engineering capabilities. Now, this not only positioned RxN to be able to win the bid, but it positioned them as an architectural firm with a unique value offering. They were one of the only firms that offered both sides, and so that's why they won the bid. And so for you to be able to tap into a similar space and to be able to follow suit, you need to have both capabilities as well. Now, this comes with choosing the right partner to be able to launch that ecotecture service line. And one example that we've highlighted for you today is Danish Energy Management, because they fit a lot of the service offerings and the must-haves of the foundational values that you carry so greatly to be able to move forward and achieve a fruitful and long relationship. And so after sourcing the right partner, you start to negotiate. And then after finalizing contract, ultimately you'd want to monitor some key KPIs. So the projects that you've bid on, the project successfully accepted, as well as the carbon emissions. And what's really key here is that the milestones that we want you to achieve are ambitious, but they are achievable. 5 projects bid on by the end of 2023, successful work on 1.5 projects during 2023, and 152,000 pounds of carbon dioxide reduced by the end of 2023, ultimately allowing you to tap into and capture the Danish market and also set you up for success in the future.
So let's look at how this is actually done. So we broke our implementation timeline into our 3 recommendations. So before the end of 2022, we want to expand the scene and change the routine and be able to have that capture that first international project. Then go before the end of 2023 and all the way to 2024 and onwards, we want to opt for green and start having building the partnership and be able to co-bid on projects that have eco and architecture on it. Looking at our risk and mitigations, we have 3 highlighted for you today, but I want to focus on the one with the highest impact, which is the relationships with Philippines government is harmed. Your current mitigant is to pull out sooner or later because your bid hasn't been accepted yet and there are other competitors, and this could still be viewed as good faith by the government given these uncertain times. However, a contingency plan is to acquire EDC support in withdrawing because with their support, it makes it more seamless to have government communications. Finally, let's look at the impact this is going to bring you. In terms of profit, it's going to bring you $8.1 million of profit with the revenue from Autism Center minusing the implementation costs of all three, which is higher than all the other alternatives. However, our eco-efficient strategy extends beyond the numbers. We know you care about community impact. That's why you choose the projects you do. With this strategy, you can also help support 150 to 200 members of the autism community, and you're also able to reduce carb CO2 emissions by 152,000. And those are the numbers I want to leave you with today.
Panel, we know we've presented a lot to you today, but it doesn't stop here. What's beyond our plan? The reason why Denmark was such a great first international expansion is that it allows you to scale easily into other key markets in the EU, markets such as Spain, such as Sweden, or in the UK. With this new impact eco-driven service line, you have a key differentiator that will allow you to scale into these markets easily. Join us in helping Architectonics build an eco-friendly, eco-efficient future. We'd like to open up the floor to any questions you might have.
Yes, Roderick, please go ahead.
Yeah, my first question here is, first of all, I really like your plan of entering the Danish market, but a lot of your steps seem to take a lot of resources, like retraining our employees to work on these new systems and teaching them about the Danish market and way of doing business. I'm just wondering, how are we supposed to handle our Canadian backlog, and is that going to potentially affect our relationships within Canada if we can't get those projects done on time?
That's a really good question. And one of the reasons why we chose Denmark specifically is because it's actually very close in culture. The ones that we pointed out to you were just the subtle cultural nuances that are different when actually adapting to the Danish market. And so in terms of an international expansion transition, you would actually face some of the smallest hurdles. Now you could continue to work on the Canadian projects backlogs and do that outside of your time, or be able to divide up the time to be able to focus on the project and also focus a little bit on the transition that you have to the Danish culture. And so we believe that through expanding to Denmark, because it has such small hurdles in terms of the cultural differences, it's actually not going to take as much time as other international expansions would.
Yes, Roderick, go ahead.
Yeah, I have another question. You were talking about partnering with a Danish firm to ease our entry into the market, and I really like that idea because I think it really makes sense that we don't have to learn everything immediately if we have a partner. But I'm wondering how that's going to affect our bottom line. On your financials, you said we're going to make 8.1 million in revenue from this project, from the first project. But I'm wondering, are we going to be, giving half that up to the Danish firm we're partnering with if we do partner with one on that project? How do you propose that works?
Yeah, that for sure. So let's move on to financials for implementation, especially, and we can look at implementation 3 about the partnership costs. There is definitely upfront costs about like legal structuring for that. However, your question is based on the actual equity ownership of between co-bidding. And for that, we think it's 50-50 because we're giving up architecture and they're giving up their energy efficiency. And with that, the revenue will be split as well. But the key thing here is that our costs will also be split because our expertise are coming from different areas. So we don't believe you have anything to worry on that end.
Bridget, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm going to go a little bit more on what Roderick had to say was with respect to getting a partner. One of the things you mentioned early on was that there's a lack of partners or firms in Denmark. So how would we mitigate the risk of not being able to find a partner if they're either competing against us or there's just not enough of them to go around?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think just a clarification, the firm that we're partnering with is actually an energy efficiency engineering firm, not an architecture firm. And so the current hole in the Denmark market is that there's a lack of architecture firms. And so they're looking for international architect firms such as yourself. However, our key company partner is going to be an energy efficiency engineering firm. And we provide you several examples here of engineering firms that would be very open to partnering with you.
Ted, please go ahead.
At the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned Denmark almost on the first slide. which is very unusual. It's like a go big or go home strategy. When you were preparing for this presentation, did you intentionally hit us with all chips on red, as they say in Las Vegas, with mentioning Denmark that quickly? Or did you just get so wrapped up in the Denmark idea that you didn't realize the unusual nature of, at the beginning of an analysis, mentioning long before a recommendation, mentioning the country of Denmark?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I can take as well. So if we just hop into our analysis slide and just go one slide back here, we actually did a very thorough analysis looking at what sort of countries we wanted to tackle. So we first plotted 15 countries, I believe, on a scatter plot based on the time to market in these countries, as well as the percentage of green space in these markets. And from there, we narrowed down 5 key markets. And from those 5 key markets, we applied 5 key criteria to get to Denmark. And so it was a very thorough process in which we eliminated all the other countries and decided that Denmark was the best market for you. We presented it to you upfront in our executive summary so that you could know top of mind that we have ambition and that we're really we're really in it to win it in the Denmark architecture market.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, judges and delegates. That is all the time that we have for questions. So delegates, you may leave the call now, and judges, you can go to the judges lounge.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.